Buongiorno. Buongiorno. Buongiorno, miei amici. Dressing up today. See? Ooh, spooky. Buongiorno, miei amici. Buongiorno. Oh, I feel like I'm heading to a funeral. You know, you're probably wondering what that's all about. Why are we being so fancy? Sometimes you just feel like dressing up a little bit. Don't we all just sometimes need to be a little bit extra? I think we do. So today I'm talking about a little snippet in Italian music history, hence the little greeting at the beginning. Buongiorno is the Italian word for hello, good day is the actual translation. And mi amici means my friends. So hello, my friends. Glad you've stopped in. Don't forget to click the subscribe button down at the bottom and thumbs up if you like the video, and the notification, of course, so you can be notified. This is a series, so we're going to be talking about this over the course of another couple of videos to break it up a little bit, little chunks, because we're gonna talk about the history of the castrati. We're also going to talk a little bit about popular aria form at the time that the castrati would have sung, called a da capo aria. And we'll talk about the structure of that and listen to some examples. And also at the end there, I'm gonna have like a little sort of vocal music lesson. We're gonna talk about the singing of some of these arias and a few aspects related to that. So let's get started talking about the history of the castrati. So castrati were singers. This practice started in about the 1500s. So we're talking about the Renaissance era. It lasted through the 1700s and even into the 1800s. We'll talk a little bit about that. So we're looking at about 250 to 300 years of this practice. Now, before we get into this too much, I do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer, a little bit of a trigger warning. Keep in mind when we're talking about music history or history of any kind, there are always going to be subjects and areas of our past, our meaning the human collective across the globe, that are unsavory, that are sort of WTF. Looking back on some of these things, we just go, are you, what? They did what? This is one of those moments. This practice started, well, essentially in the church. The young men, before their voice changed, the boys that sang in the choir, if they showed musical promise or talent, were castrated before their voices changed, so that their high voices would stay intact into adulthood, giving them this angelic sound and this high quality. Why did they do this? And yes, that's right, you heard me correctly. They castrated. They cut off the family jewels. 8, 9 years old. Yeah, I'll give you a moment. Wrap your mind around that for just a minute. Yeah. Okay, moving on. They would do this because women weren't allowed to sing in church. I'll give you a minute on that too. So yeah. No, women couldn't sing in church. I don't think it's because they weren't very good. I think it had something to do with women not being considered equals to men. You see what I mean? Looking back on history sometimes is a little bit of a kerfluffle. Women couldn't sing in church, so we're going to mutilate our young men's genitalia so that they can sing high like ladies. Okay, 1500s, moving on. Primarily started in the church for singing in choir, sacred music. And then it sort of takes off when opera becomes a popular art form. Now, a little bit of history on opera. Starts about 1600. First opera was written in 1603 by Caccini and Peri, and it is based off the story of Orfeo and Eurydice, Greek love story tragedy that was very popular. They used a lot of Greek mythology at that time throughout this area. Sort of like, we're really into superhero movies. They were really into Greek stuff at the time. So story of Orfeo Eurydice, very first opera, doesn't really, it's the first one. It's sort of an experimental thing, and it doesn't really kick in until about 1607, and then we get the same story called Orfeo, yeah, in Italy by Monteverdi in 1607. So first successful opera, and still performed today. It's beautiful. At the beginning, Castrati, who would be cast in a secular stage production, might be in a secondary role, possibly as the character Eurydice in the opera, which would have been a main role, female role. That could have been the case. However, most of the time it was secondary roles. We don't start seeing them as the leading man until a little bit later. So let's talk about what it is this procedure would do. They would castrate their young boys, usually about the age of 8 or 9, if they showed musical talent. Now, of course, now it's considered a barbaric practice, and we'll talk about how it came to end finally. A couple things about the procedure. A lot of boys didn't make it through the procedure. There would be complications. Often something to the effect of giving them too much of the narcotic or opium that they used to treat pain management. They would give them wrong dosages, and sometimes the boys would pass from that. Another problem was that they would use basically asphyxiation. They would put pressure on the carotid artery, and sometimes they would linger too long and it would cause them to die. They used this technique to keep them unconscious during the procedure. So these are a couple of things that would happen. Now, physiologically, some of the changes that would happen because of the lack of testosterone, their bone joints would be affected, and they would often have elongated arms and rib cages. One of the side effects as a singer with an elongated rib cage is they were able to hold extremely extended notes, and they were able to just have more air capacity to be able to sing extremely long phrases, and added to the technique that they used that was so coveted at that time. So clearly they knew that this practice was absolutely ridiculous and barbaric, because nobody wanted to admit that they were doing it. So whenever anyone would inquire, often they would sort of get this runaround. There is a case in the 18th century. There was a historian by the name of Charles Bruni, and he went from place to place asking where he might be able to find someone that could do the procedure. And this is what he found. He's quoted to say that I inquired throughout Italy at what places boys were chiefly qualified for singing by castration, but could get no certain intelligence. I was told at Milan that it was at Venice that it was at Bologna, and at Bologna it was completely denied. I was referred to Florence, and from Florence to Rome, and from Rome I was sent to Naples, where it said that there's an inscription that says "Qui si castrano ragazzi," which means here boys are castrated. But I was utterly unable to see or hear of any such shops during my residence in that city. That says something. They knew that this was something that was not anything anybody was proud of or wanted to admit to. A couple of historic terms you might find them referred to by as musici. They would also use that term in a derogatory way. While they were loved and admired for their talent and treated almost as rock stars of the day, women would swoon and just lose, fainting and all kinds of things during performances. At the same time, they were also made fun of because of, the way they looked. They often were awkward because of the elongated arms and some of the physical characteristics. Often they were not good actors, and they were gangly and just difficult to watch in some cases. So they were often referred to in derogatory ways as well. So another term that you might find is iverato, which translates to emasculated, or you might recognize the name eunuch. That's a little bit of a problematic term, given that eunuch is a term used for anyone castrated, and that had been going on for centuries And that indicates that could have been at any time, and often was after the voice change. So wouldn't necessarily be this case, because castrati were surgically altered for the sole purpose of retaining the voice for music. That's what makes that different than the term eunuch.